It survived space, but that's just the beginning. Imagine an environment so hostile it feels like a nightmare. The temperature drops to a bone-chilling minus 270 degrees Celsius, just a fraction above absolute zero. Now, imagine being thrust into a complete vacuum, where there is no oxygen to breathe, and the pressure is so low that your blood would literally boil in your veins. To top it off, you are being bombarded by cosmic radiation, thousands of times stronger than what we experience on Earth. Radiation that shreds DNA like paper in a hurricane. For almost every living thing we have ever discovered, this is an instant, inescapable death sentence. But there is a tiny, eight-legged pioneer on our planet that looks at these impossible conditions and simply shrugs. In 2007, scientists tucked a group of these microscopic creatures onto a rocket and exposed them to the raw, unfiltered vacuum of open space for 10 full days. When they returned to Earth, not only were they still alive, but they began to reproduce as if they had just returned from a summer vacation. Meet the tardigrade, also affectionately known as the water bear. It is a creature so resilient it challenges our very definition of what it means to be alive. But here is the real twist. As mind-blowing as it is to survive the vacuum of space, that isn't even its most impressive ability. This creature has a secret biological panic button that allows it to cheat death in ways that sound like pure science fiction. By the end of this journey, you'll discover how this microscopic beast doesn't just endure harsh environments. It effectively pauses its own existence to wait out the end of the world. Because what this creature can do sounds almost impossible. Before we dive into their superpowers, we need to understand what we're looking at. If you went into your backyard right now, picked up a clump of damp moss, and put it under a microscope, you would likely find a bustling colony of them. Tardigrades are microscopic animals, usually measuring less than 1 millimeter in length, roughly the size of the period at the end of this sentence. Under the lens, they are surprisingly charismatic. They have plump, segmented bodies, 4 pairs of stubby legs tipped with tiny claws, and a slow, lumbering gait that earned them the nickname water bear. They aren't rare or alien in terms of location. They are found almost everywhere on Earth. You can find them in the deepest ocean trenches, the highest peaks of the Himalayas, tropical rainforests, and the frozen wastes of Antarctica. They thrive in the ordinary and the extreme alike. Despite their humble appearance, they are one of the most successful life forms in history. They have existed on Earth for over 500 million years. To put that in perspective, they saw the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, survived all 5 of Earth's major mass extinction events, and didn't blink an eye. They are built for a world that is constantly trying to kill its inhabitants. But its real power appears when conditions turn truly deadly. That is when the water bear reveals its true, indestructible nature. Most animals have a limit. If it gets too hot, they pant. If it gets too cold, they shiver. But when a tardigrade encounters a lethal threat, like the total disappearance of water, it does something radical. It enters a state called cryptobiosis. The tardigrade begins by retracting its head and its 8 legs. It then proceeds to lose up to 97% of its body's water content, shriveling up into a dry, lifeless-looking husk known as a ton. In this state, its metabolism, the chemical engine that powers life, drops to an incredible 0.01% of its normal rate. For all intents and purposes, the chemical reactions we define as life have stopped. The tardigrade isn't hibernating in the way a bear does. It is paused. In this ton state, the creature becomes a biological statue, immune to the passage of time. They have been known to stay in this state for years, and in some documented cases, even decades, waiting for a single drop of liquid to return. Because they are no longer performing the messy, fragile chemistry of living, they become almost indestructible. They have moved beyond the reach of hunger, thirst, and even aging. In this state, they become almost indestructible. This ton state is exactly how they survived their famous trip into orbit. When exposed to the vacuum of space, the tardigrades didn't just hold their breath, they were already in their indestructible form. In the vacuum, there is no air pressure to hold a body together, yet the tardigrade's specialized structure prevented its cells from rupturing. They withstood the extreme temperature swings of low Earth orbit, where they might face blistering heat in the sun and absolute freezing cold in the shadows. Most importantly, they survived the UV radiation. Space is flooded with solar radiation that snaps DNA strands like dry twigs. Yet, when these water bears were rehydrated back on Earth, they simply woke up. They stretched their 8 legs, looked for a piece of moss, and continued living normally. This feat proved that life does not necessarily need an atmosphere or a magnetic field to persist, at least not in the short term. It reinforced the idea that very few organisms on this planet, or perhaps any other, are as hardy as the tardigrade. It showed that the limits of life are much wider than we ever guessed. But space isn't even the limit. While the space experiment grabbed headlines, the tardigrade's performance in laboratory torture tests is even more shocking. Scientists have pushed these creatures to the absolute physical brink. They have been frozen to minus 272 degrees Celsius, just 1 degree above the theoretical limit of absolute zero, where all molecular motion stops. They stayed there for days and survived. On the flip side, they have been heated to over 150 degrees Celsius, well above the boiling point of water, and walked away. They can endure pressures exceeding 6,000 atmospheres. That is 6 times the pressure found at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the ocean. If you or I were subjected to that, we would be crushed instantly into a pulp. They can also withstand radiation doses of 5,000 grays. To put that in perspective, a dose of just 5 to 10 gray is fatal to a human. They can live without a single drop of water for a decade and survive in environments saturated with toxic chemicals that would dissolve the lungs of any other animal. So how is this even possible? How can a creature made of the same basic biological building blocks as us be so much tougher? The secret to the tardigrade's superpower isn't just a thick skin. It's a masterclass in biological engineering at the molecular level. When a tardigrade dries out, its cells should collapse and its proteins should tangle and break. To prevent this, tardigrades produce unique, intrinsically disordered proteins that replace the water in their cells. These proteins turn into a glass-like substance, creating a rigid internal scaffold that holds the cell's structure in place, preventing it from shriveling into nothingness. Even more impressive is their DNA protection. Scientists discovered a specific protein in tardigrades called DSUP, short for damage suppressor. This protein acts like a physical shield, wrapping around the tardigrade's DNA to protect it from being shattered by radiation. It's like a lead vest for the creature's most vital genetic information. If the DNA does get damaged, the tardigrade is a master of repair. While our bodies struggle to fix a few breaks in our genetic code, the tardigrade can piece its genome back together with startling efficiency once it rehydrates. They don't just resist damage, they have evolved mechanisms to prevent it entirely. It's not just survival, it's biological engineering. The most mind-blowing moment in a tardigrade's life is the reawakening. When you add a single drop of water to a shriveled, decade-old ton, a miracle occurs. Within minutes to a few hours, the glass-like proteins dissolve, the metabolism reboots, and the creature stretches its legs. It resumes its normal activity as if the last 10 years never happened. Here is the kicker. Tardigrades do not age while in the ton state. If a tardigrade has a natural lifespan of a few months, and it spends 10 years in cryptobiosis, it still has those few months left to live once it wakes up. It has effectively found a way to pause the clock of mortality. This ability blurs the line between life and death. If an organism has no metabolism, no heartbeat, and no cellular activity, is it still alive? Or has it found a third state of existence? By stepping outside the flow of time, the tardigrade shows us that life is much more resilient and much more mysterious than we ever imagined. And this changes how we think about life itself. The tardigrade is more than just a biological curiosity. It is a blueprint for the future of human technology. Scientists are currently studying the DSUP protein to see if it can be used to protect human cells from radiation during cancer treatments or long-term space travel. If we could borrow the tardigrade's shield, we might be able to survive the journey to Mars with far less risk. There are also massive implications for medicine right here on Earth. The glass-like proteins that protect tardigrade cells could lead to new ways of preserving human organs for transplant without the need for extreme refrigeration, potentially saving thousands of lives. Furthermore, the tardigrade's ability to dry out and return to life is being studied to create vaccines and medicines that don't require a cold chain, allowing life-saving treatments to be shipped to remote, hot areas of the world without spoiling. If something so small can do this, what else is possible? It gives us an entirely new insight into life beyond Earth. The existence of the tardigrade forces us to ask a difficult question. Have we been too narrow-minded in our search for life beyond Earth? When we look at Mars or the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn, we often dismiss them as too harsh or dead. But the tardigrade proves that life doesn't just survive in habitable zones, it thrives by redefining what habitable means. Could similar organisms be hiding in the frozen crust of Europa or the salty dust of Mars, waiting for a drop of water to wake them up? We may be vastly underestimating life's resilience across the cosmos. Perhaps the universe isn't a graveyard, but a vast collection of paused organisms waiting for the right conditions to resume their journey. The tardigrade is a reminder that just because we don't see something moving doesn't mean it isn't there. And that might be the strangest part of all. In the end, the tardigrade is a tiny, 8-legged testament to the power of adaptation. It is a microscopic animal that can survive the vacuum of space, temperatures that would freeze the air, and radiation levels that would melt a human. It hasn't survived for 500 million years through size or strength, but through the sheer brilliance of its biological design. It redefines the limits of life on Earth and beyond. It teaches us that the most powerful survivor isn't the one that fights the hardest, but the one that is most adaptable to the changing tides of the universe. It is a microscopic marvel that reminds us how much we still have to learn about the world beneath our feet. It survived space, but its greatest power is something even stranger. It can simply stop being alive and start again. Would humans ever be able to survive like this? Could we ever unlock the secret to pausing our own biological clocks for long-distance space travel? Tell me your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the world's toughest survivor, hit the like button and subscribe for more extreme science stories. See you in the next one.